Anna J. Stewart is an award-winning USA Today best-selling author of over 50 sweet to spicy romances, she tells us. Her book, Recipe for Redemption, is optioned for a TV movie by Brainpower Studios. She says, irrespective of the genre, her book always centered around the family. Today, we're going to focus specifically a little bit on her book, Exposed. So stay tuned. You're watching the Writer's Corner live show. If you're just joining us, then welcome to the Writer's Corner live show. If you've never watched us before, we've been going live for over 4.5 years. Do give us a follow, because if you click the follow button, you'll get a notification next time we go live. I'm Bridgetti Lumbanda from Cape Town in South Africa, and we're going to be talking to Anna J. Stewart. She's our guest in the studio today, and our live stream is brought to you compliments of Creative Edge, StreamYard, and Be Live Media. So a special warm welcome wherever you're watching us from. If you're watching us on Twitter, on Facebook, on YouTube, on LinkedIn, on Twitch, and also over on Amazon Live, then a very, very warm welcome to you. As usual, one of the things that we're passionate about on the show is helping authors level up. Thanks to the pandemic, you're no longer limited to talking about your books only at your local library or where you live locally. You can literally talk about your book to people, to readers. You can connect with readers online globally. Isn't that just wonderful? It's really turned the tables on how we can market our books. And so just wanted to, a couple of suggestions that we've got for you if you are going live to talk about your book and do some readings of your book, or just doing a Q&A, or giving your readers the backstory of your book. Now, if you go live on Instagram or on TikTok, for example, you will typically turn your phone into portrait mode, and that is 100% correct. So portrait mode is what you're seeing right now, and that means that people can see you all over the screen, and that's 100% correct. But if you're going live on one of the other platforms like on Facebook Live or on Amazon Live or on LinkedIn or on YouTube, you want to turn your phone the other way around lengthwise, and that is called landscape mode. Because on those platforms, you are now using the full screen real estate, which means your audience can see you well, you can hold your book in your hand. And talking about holding your book in your hand, what you want to do is stabilize your phone. You don't want to make people feel seasick because your hand will be shaky. There's no way, it's impossible for you to hold your hand stable. If you're trying to talk, make contact with your audience and hold your book in your hand, it's a little bit much. So doing this in some kind of a tripod, and there are tons and tons and tons of tripods. So you can literally take your pick. If you're watching us over on Amazon Live, I've got some recommendations there for you. But if you are traveling with your book, you're doing a book tour of some sort, and you forgot your paraphernalia at home, here's a very quick hack. Just take your phone with some press stick or Tic Tac or sticky tape, whatever you've got, and put your phone on the window. The great thing about that is you'll get rid of the black lines, and you'll have front-facing light, and your phone will be at 90 degrees, which is the perfect angle for you to be communicating. One thing though, people will forgive you if your picture's not 100% great, but people will tune out if you don't have great audio. And something very simple, a Bluetooth microphone that you can invest in. I love these Rode lavalier microphones, and there's various types of them, but the Rode lavalier is a very great mic. So especially if you wanted to talk away from your phone and be mobile, those are great things to invest in. Now let's dive into our amazing author for today, Anna J. Stewart. And before I invite Anna to come and join us on screen, my amazing friend and co-host is Mary Elizabeth Jackson. Mary is a special needs and disabilities advocate. She's an educational speaker, a podcaster, ghostwriter, and also an award-winning author. And please go and check out her latest release called Cheers from Heaven. Mary, how are you today?
I am great today, and I am so super excited about our author today. So I found out that I've seen one of her movies about one of her stories, and I didn't even know it. So now I was like, oh, I'm so
And
fangirling over her.
fangirling.
I know, right? So I'm so excited to have Anna with us today. So let's just jump right in, hear all about it.
Absolutely. So if anyone hasn't met Anna J. Stewart, she is a award-winning USA Today best author, over 50. Just let that sink
Yeah,
in. Over
I know, right?
50
It's crazy. It's awesome.
romance
I know.
novels, and she calls them sweet and spicy.
I know. I love it. I love it.
And kudos to her. Her book, Recipe for Redemption, is optioned for a TV movie by Brain Power Studios as well. So that is just wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. And she says she always writes around the family, whether that's your natural family or the family of your choosing. So let's give her a big warm welcome and ask her to join us here because I want to just hear so much more about her.
Hi,
Anna, welcome
Anna.
to the show. Oh my goodness, it's so wonderful to have you join us today. Thank you for making the time. We really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. It's great to meet you guys.
Oh, it's so nice to meet you and so exciting. Okay, we just got to jump. Brigetti, let's go. We got to jump right in. There's so much to ask and so much to talk to you about.
Yes, there's a
Okay.
there's a lot to ask. So the first thing we always like to ask all is, how did you get started? Did you just wake up one day and decide I want to write and I'm going to write 50 books? I mean, I'm still trying to get my head around how you do that, but um, where did your love for writing start from? Did it start from an early age or something you acquired later? What was your journey into becoming such a fantastically, highly acclaimed author? Tell us a bit about it.
Well, I think it started because I was a reader. I always joke I came out of the womb with a book in my hand. And it was the one thing growing up that my mother never once said no to. She might say no to a toy or a game or something like that. But when it came to books, whatever I wanted to read, she was more than happy to supply me with that. I guess it was my drug of choice. And then in high school, I kind of fell into writing. A group of friends and I started making up mini romances, which we will probably now call fan fiction, featuring ourselves and our favorite rock stars. And everybody else kind of outgrew it in a couple of weeks. And I did not. I was like, that's all I wanted to do was just write these stories. And shortly thereafter, a friend of mine gave me a romance novel to read. I needed something to occupy myself. We were doing standardized tests in school, and it was the Scantron test, which I always do horribly at. But I always ended up finishing early, and I needed something to read afterwards where everybody else finished. And it was a romance novel, and it was one written by Nora Roberts back from 1986. It was Partners. I still have that exact same book. And by the time I finished that book, I'm like, I have to know how to do this. This is what I want to do. So the writing obsession just kind of got worse. I was a horrible student in high school, mainly because you're stuck taking a bunch of classes that you really have no interest in. Everything's required. So I never really found, other than English, I was just terrible at everything. And then I got to college, and I got to take a whole bunch of different classes and a whole bunch of different subjects. And I kept changing my majors, mainly depending on what I was reading at the time. Everything sounded like a great occupation. And then it dawned on me that I could actually be all of those things for the length of time it takes me to write a book. So it took me a really long time to get serious and to actually do the work and just stop playing at the writing and get serious about the writing. And I did that in 2011. And then in 2012, I finaled in a national contest for romance writers. And 2 years later, I was published by both Harlequin and Berkeley. And I think I was offered within the space of 3 months between those two publishers. So it all fell in line. But I will also say that a lot of the opportunities I was afforded was because of contacts I made and friends that I made within the romance industry. I will go to my grave saying that my journey with Harlequin would not have happened if it had not been for Melinda Curtis, who's another Harlequin author who had an idea for an anthology, invited me to participate in it. And that was my foot in the door. And that was how the journey started with Harlequin.
Wow. Oh my gosh, that is so exciting. I mean, and we love to hear the journeys of the authors we get to interview, right, Brigetti? It's just so amazing. So you've had tons of accomplishments. Like Brigetti said, you've written 50 books plus, right? Because you've got 5 coming out next year.
Right.
And yeah, right. So okay. So she tops Thornton. We have to introduce you to our buddy Thornton. But what has been like your biggest surprise, or just your most exciting thing that you feel like's happened for you so far? And there's probably several, but can you think of one big one?
I think, well, when I got when Melinda called me, it was around Christmas Eve in 2013. To tell me that the anthology had sold. And she said, "Congratulations, you're a Harlequin author." That was a dream achieved. And I remember exactly where I was standing in the house. I mean, and to hear that news from one of my best friends, I don't know that there was a better way I could have received that information. So that was a big one. Getting the email about them turning one of my books into a TV movie, was a shock. I had no idea it was coming, no idea any of my books were even under consideration. And they had already started filming by the time I got that email. So it was kind of a whirlwind couple of weeks. I was on my way to a readers conference at the time in New Orleans. And then I got back, and 3 days later, I was on a plane to Toronto to go to the set and visit my movie being made. So those are so far, I think, 2 of my biggest highlights.
Well, tell everybody the name of the movie so they can go watch it real quick.
Sure. It's called Christmas Recipe for Romance. The book it is based on is Recipe for Romance. Christmas Recipe for Romance. Yes, I think that's what it is. I'm starting to blank on all of my titles. I can hardly remember them anymore. But yeah, and I believe it's streaming on multiple different services. And the 2 actors who starred in it are just absolutely delightful. I follow them both on social media, and they were so nice and just so much fun. So it was a wonderful experience.
I've watched it. It's a great one.
It's really cute. And it's, I love Christmas. So it was, and the fact that the book was not Christmas, they turned it into Christmas. And the whole cast and crew were just so welcoming and so excited to have me there, and just made me feel like part of the family. So thank you to Brainpower Studios for making that a remarkable experience.
That's amazing. I mean, that's just about every author's dream is to have their book turned into a movie. And what makes this more remarkable is the fact that you didn't even know it was happening. Because I think, people would submit their stories to screenwriters, and just hope for the best. And some people do that over and over and over. And this was just a complete, surprise for you. So that is even more awesome. So congratulations. It just, to me, it just speaks to the fact that you never know. It just takes one person to look at your work. Yeah. And that's one reason why you should religiously put yourself out there, because you never know who is going to pick up your work.
Absolutely. And I've really become a firm believer in say yes and figure the rest out later. Because if you say no to an opportunity, the door closes. But if you say yes, even if it doesn't work out the way you think it is, you've probably opened the passage into something else that's coming down the road. So keep keep open to options and jump at everything, including interviews that, you know, you're kindly invited to participate in. So thank you.
Big pleasure. So, you know, the book that we wanted to just focus on a bit today is Exposed. And, you know, having written so many books, how do you come up with the ideas for your books? I mean, what's your inspiration, and what was the inspiration for Exposed?
So my ideas tend to come from all I never know. And honestly, I don't know where they come from. My brain must operate in a very unique way. I always have a story idea percolating in there. So I've got about 10 even now that I've written down like short notes for as a possible project in the future. But as far as Exposed, which got that right here. This is the arc. I haven't gotten my print copies yet, but that's what the gorgeous cover looks like. Thank you, Authors on a Dime, for the amazing cover. The idea for this actually stemmed from watching an episode of White Collar, which was a TV show that starred Matt Bomer and Willie Garson. And it was on quite a few years ago, but there was a particular episode where Willie Garson's character purchases a storage unit that's being auctioned off because the payments have stopped and they want to clear it out. So he buys this storage unit, and inside is a bunch of photography stuff. There's old cameras and pictures and all kinds of stuff. And the first time I watched it, I went, I wonder if there's any undeveloped film in there. And then that kind of got my mind going as far as, well, if there was undeveloped film, what might be on that film if someone were to develop it? And that's really the crux, and what gets the story of Exposed started is my heroine, Riley Temple. Her hobby is developing lost film. She goes to storage units. She goes to antique stores and places like that where people have offloaded belongings. And she collects undeveloped film. She goes back to her studio and she develops it just to see what's on it, and if it's something that she can turn into something more artistic or use it as a display piece. And when she develops these pictures, she uncovers possible evidence of a supposedly long settled murder conviction, a very famous fictional case from Hollywood. And she opens the door to a whole crap ton of problems, which puts her in the crosshairs with a very sexy cop. Always have to have a sexy cop who isn't so sure he wants the information she's discovered to come out. So it's super fun. It's exciting. It's sexy. And it's possibly also the darkest thing I've written, but it was also just one of the most fun projects I've worked on so far.
Wow, that is awesome. Okay, so leading into that, are your characters mostly fictional? Or are they based on like you, your life, people you know? I mean, you just kind of led into that a little bit from watching a TV show, but the like other characters, or the majority of them, you know, are they based on real life?
I don't think they are. It could be that I'm pulling something out of my mind that I don't realize that I am. But as far as I know, unless I specifically allude to it in the book, and I have done that at times, they're usually almost always creations of my own. Now, the character of Moxie, who is Riley's great aunt, who's in her 80s in this book, she and Riley own a apartment house in Los Angeles. And the apartment house was originally a housing facility for starlets in the 40s and the 50s, like the chorus girls and all of that. Now, this is all kind of my creation, but I had the idea that there was a boarding house that once housed classic Hollywood actresses. So Moxie is kind of a combination of, you know, how like Betty White and all of these different older actresses that unfortunately we're now losing. And I kind of put her into like she was one time like a Shirley Temple kind of child star who was known for one particular role, and she would love to have a comeback. So there's an 80-year-old woman who, you know, still wants to live the Hollywood lifestyle, even though she's kind of aged out of it. And she's also playing the comic relief in the story. So instances like that, where characters are kind of a conglomeration of an idea of a group of different people, sure, they're based on people, but no one in particular. I will say the one time I make the exception is when I need to have some kind of cathartic release, and I need a murder victim. Usually the murder victim, especially if they've died horribly, has been inspired by somebody who's really ticked me off.
That's awesome, Anna. That's the cool thing about being an
Oh my
author.
goodness.
We can
That's
write those.
hilarious.
Yeah, that we can write those scenes as a writer or an author that we can't work out in life. Because boy, I play those things in my head all the time. Like things with your kids or your spouse or sibling or whatever. So that's awesome, Anna.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Anna, you showed the cover just now. So you were saying that did you have any input into the design of your cover? I mean, it's a beautiful cover. Did you have any
I
input
did.
into that, or?
Yeah. So so this is published by Arc Manor. Kasich Romance is their new romance line. I'm fortunate that they asked me to write this launch book for the single title. They've done a few romance anthologies edited by the amazing Leslie Robin, who's also a fabulous author in her own right. But one of the things I asked for when they asked me to write the book was I would like cover control. And Shahid, my publisher, said, okay. So he let me hire the designer who I had worked with previously, and that's Authors on a Dime. And she came up with a couple of initial ideas. I chose one. We ran, and then we narrowed it down to two. And I sent both to my editor and said, which one do you like better? Ironically, she did not choose the one I liked. But I'm very happy that she did choose this one because I think it's really unique. And from there, the designer and I, we got on Zoom and we pulled up the file and we played with fonts and colors and all this other kind of stuff. And it was a really, really fun process. Especially since writing for Harlequin, I fill out an art fact sheet where I give all the details about the book, and then they turn it over to the art department, and what they come up with is what we end up with. So it's always a surprise when I get my cover. And most of the time I'm very happy with it, but it was a nice experience to have, helping to develop the concept of the cover.
Awesome. Okay, so now that you've showed us the cover, do you have a page or two you can read to us?
Sure, I will read the opening page. And this is a prologue.
Okay, that sounds awesome. Thank you.
Okay. Only the walls heard her screams. Old, crumbling stone walls dripping with her terror. The now familiar drug-induced fog in her brain refused to lift, trapping her in the unending cycle of confusion and fear. How long had it been this time? Days, weeks, months? He always waited until she was asleep, and every time she closed her eyes, she expected it to be the end. Sleep was his weapon of choice. Sleep and the drugs. It never stopped. When was it going to stop? She never expected to die at 23, but she would. Death teased her with sweet relief, and not even death seemed to want her. Yet, the thought of escape, of release, however she might attain it, brought a chilling anticipation of peace. Acceptance had taken time. Time that had turned her mind to mush and her will to dust. She couldn't remember the last time she'd screamed, but she had screamed. So long and so loud, her throat was scraped raw, and she coughed up blood. Eventually, the screams had quieted and turned to tears, which flowed into a rage that filled the windowless room with a fire stoked by every breath she took. But it hadn't mattered. Nothing did.
Nice.
Thank you. That certainly sounds sweet and spicy.
Doesn't it? It was one. I can almost say it was a cathartic prologue to write because I didn't have any boundaries. My editor literally said, write what you want to write, however you want to write it. And I knew I needed a really power punch beginning to the book because it's not only launching the book, it's launching the series because there are going to be 5 books in the series. And when I finished writing it, I had the feeling I had done a really good job. But writers always need that self-confidence boost. So I sent it to my 2 critique partners. It's Melinda Curtis and another heartwarming author, Carrie Lynn Webb, who we've worked together for years. And after they read it, they emailed me back, and Melinda said, "This is fabulous. This is your voice. This is what you need to be writing." And Carrie wrote me back and she said, "It's really great. You scared the crap out of me. I can't read this book." So for me, that was hitting the absolute sweet spot of readers. And it was validation, and it gave me the oomph I needed to really dive deep into this book. So.
Wow, that's awesome. Okay, I want to know, since you've written so many of these, can you give us 3 key points for anyone wanting to write romance? What needs to be, and there's so many little aspects to it, but what can you tell our audience right now, and anyone wanting to write romance, what do you think 3 really important points or keys are to writing a great romance book?
Number 1 with romance is always conflict. Conflict. Whatever is keeping your characters apart, whatever is keeping them from achieving their happily ever afters, that is the focus of your book. And conflict is not a disagreement. Conflict is not something that can be solved with a conversation. Conflict is something like putting a woman determined to uncover the truth against a hero who is determined to stop her from finding that truth. That's conflict. And conflict is something that has to be overcome by both of them. They have to come to a change of belief system. Mary Buckham taught me that that's how to define conflict. It's really a clash of belief systems. And I don't mean political or religious, not that kind of belief system, but the core of who these characters are have to clash in some way. You have a wanderer versus a homebody. You have a single mother and a hero who doesn't want children. There has to be something for them to overcome emotionally in order to earn their happily ever after. So first and foremost, if you're writing a romance, that conflict should absolutely be front and center of the page. Second, if you're writing romance, embrace that, cheerlead it. Romance gets picked on a lot. It's also the biggest selling genre out there. So embrace it, love it with your whole heart. Never be ashamed of what you're writing. Whatever you're writing, whatever genre, stories are needed desperately. It's a balm to the soul, especially when times get really rough. So I think those are probably my biggest pieces of advice. And the third thing would be to read everything. Don't limit yourself to romance. Read everything. I read horror. I read thrillers. I read science fiction. I read some fantasy. I try to read everything because everything has a place in romance. Romance can stretch across the genres. Not all other genres can stretch into romance. So read, and then write.
Good advice.
Excellent advice. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for all those pointers, for sharing that with our audience today. One last quick question before we wrap this up, because we're just about out of time. Are you traditionally published or self-published? Have you done both? Do you have a preference?
I am mostly traditionally published. My preference is to be traditionally published. I have self-published some works in conjunction with other authors. The only things I have that are my own that I've self-published were previously published elsewhere, and I got the rights back, and I wanted them to be available, so I self-published them. I'm horrible at promotion, and self-published authors work their butts off to get their work out there. I'm honestly, and this is going to sound weird, I'm too lazy to work that hard. I want to write the book, and then I want to send it off and not worry about it until I get it back to edits, because I'm already on to the next project.
Got it.
Yeah. So it's kudos to all the self-published authors out there, but that is not for me. I am very happy being traditionally published.
Good for you.
Interesting hearing that from you, because every author's got a different reason why they prefer self-publishing and why they prefer being traditionally published. So I totally hear you. A lot of authors out there are not marketers. I mean, nothing prepares you for the big marketing exercise that goes along with being a published author, because the books don't just fly off the shelves by themselves. So
Right.
it's great that you've mentioned that, if you are self-published, you have to work just that little bit harder. Have you though invested in a publicist?
I do have a wonderful publicist named Mickey Mickelson. Shout out to Mickey at Creative Edge. That was a gift given to me by my publisher at Arc Manor. Before that, I had not had one, mainly because it's an expense, and I live on my writing money, and I have to be very careful about where it goes. So I'm thrilled to be working with Mickey. He's such a great cheerleader, and he's so enthusiastic, and he's been a lot of fun to work with. I'm taking full advantage while I have him, and am happy to do that. But as far as hiring one for myself, no, I have not done that.
Yeah, I kind of, the way I sort of look at that whole sort of should you have a publicist or not, is like walking into a courtroom, without a lawyer. Your cheerleader. And I think it's so much better if you walk into a library or an institution and say, talk to my publicist. It just kind of levels you up just a little bit as an author. If you can kind of say, well, talk to my publicist, it just gives you a little bit more authority, I think.
Yes, I will look forward to getting a call where I can actually say that. I do have him listed on my website, but yeah, I think that's been one of the surprising benefits, because Arc Manor is a smaller publisher compared to Harlequin. They're certainly growing in status, and they have a wonderful science fiction fantasy publication line that they do. I was actually surprised when they said, "Oh yeah, you'll have a publicist once, when we launch the line," and I'm like, "Okay."
Yeah, that's great. It really is. Yeah, it does it makes a huge difference. Well, listen, thank you, Anna, so much for being on, and knowing that you're writing so many books and you have 5 coming out next year. We definitely have to have you back on.
I would love to be back anytime. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anna, and thanks everyone for watching us today. And if you are catching the replay, thanks very much. Watch it from the beginning so you hear the whole of Anna's story. We'll see you back on the next episode of the Writer's Corner live show. Take care, everyone. Bye for now.
Bye.